report be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for September 2016.
Comments? Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question that I believe is material to the city finances. I know the mayor was unable to make the pre-budget meeting, and I need to ask you on the record, Mayor, just so that we can clarify it. It's come to my attention that in speaking to your departments and some of the meetings that you've had, that you're stating either up to a $3 million shortfall or deficit may occur in our budget year next year with regard to our business income tax receipts. I don't want to assume to know exactly what you're saying, and since it's relevant to the budget hearing and what we're doing in the planning stages now, I want to make sure that we hear it directly and that we understand it completely as part of the budget considerations for this year. So if you could answer that, it'd be a big help.
Sure, it has come to the knowledge of our income tax administrator that we are anticipating a $2 to $2.5 million shortfall in our business profit tax collections for 2017. So that would be tax year 2016, and we're making preparations in accordance with that potential possibility.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
Can I ask a question then on that? With the business shortfall, is that because of deferrals that we've been doing, or is that?
I'm unsure what you mean by deferrals,
well,
Councilwoman. Can you explain to me what you mean by deferral?
I sure can. The business deferral program that we've been doing since 2012, where we're deferring approximately 40 businesses, is this $2 to $2.5 million projected shortfall because of deferrals being in place?
I'm unsure what deferral program you are speaking of.
You're not sure of the deferral program that we're speaking of. Do you need me to pull out minutes from Income Tax Board and all of our committee reports? I don't understand what you don't understand.
We are not in the business of deferring taxes.
So there is no longer, currently as of today, the Income Tax Department is not deferring 40 businesses as stated by Andrew several times on the record.
We've never used the term deferral. And I believe maybe perhaps you're talking about estimated taxes, and you'll be happy to know that taxes for all parties in all three categories are expected to be paid when they are due based on legislation that's been previously passed by this council.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? Report be filed.
Any other old business? Ms. Frishy.
I would like to go back to our earlier discussion on income tax. The mayor seems to inform me that we've never talked about deferrals. But if we're talking about a $2.5 million, $3 million deficit, and we are having our departments maintain the same 2016 budget for next year with a hiring freeze, please tell me how you're coming up with a $2.5 million deficit if it's not coming from deferrals.
Okay, so we are anticipating in our estimates for business profit tax for 2017 to be $2 to $2.5 million short. We collect obviously in three categories: in a withholding category, which we anticipate to see some growth in. We also collect in an individual category, which we anticipate to see some growth in. But unfortunately, in the business profit arena, we anticipate there to be a significant drop. This community is very fortunate to have several businesses in it that are large players in certain parts of the economy, and one would just have to take a look at what's happening around the world and the volatility that exists within certain sectors of business to better understand why perhaps we would have a drop in our business profit tax collections for 2017. The good news is that we have prepared for moments like this and are anticipating this potentially to be just a short hiccup in our operations, and we have money in the bank, cash actually, to be able to cover a potential shortfall in our budget for 2017. So trying to be prudent and conservative in the way that we do things around here and the operations that we have come to serve this great community with. we will be proposing to you a deficit budget, but thankfully we have money in the bank to be able to cover that potential shortfall.
So, to be clear, the 40 businesses that we are deferring currently, is that number still 40 on the business deferral side, yes or no?
I think perhaps you misunderstand what it is that you are talking about, and if you would like further education about estimated payments and the legislation that council passed about 7 years ago, I would be happy to have a side conversation with you. It is not a deferral program. We do not have an active deferral program with our income tax collections. And if you would like to continue this discussion offline, it might better serve.
I'd rather keep it online. So if you're telling me there's no deferrals, we've had the discussion with the income tax, Andrew, you, and income tax committee and committee of a whole. I'm sitting here with the state audit that we just had done for the state, and I have our previous year audit, and they very clearly use the word deferral.
Well,
So are they wrong and so am I, or who?
it's either two things, Councilwoman. It's or maybe it's something else that you can explain. One, it's that you do not understand the legislation that is in effect that this community has been operating under for the last 7 years. Or two, it's just continuing to be a political piece that you like to bring up occasionally. It's not a deferral. No one has ever called a deferral. Individuals, businesses, and people who owe withholding pay taxes when taxes are due.
Okay, so I'm going to read the state audit. During our audit, we became familiar with a change in the procedures that allow for deferral of income tax payments by businesses that operate within the city. I have been very much clear on where I stand on the deferral process. Number two, it has been said by Andrew, and yes, it has. I have the minutes right here where we use the word deferral. So it's been reported in the Courier several times that businesses are being deferred. So I just want to understand that if we are looking at a deficit and you are telling me that it has nothing to do with deferrals, are we deferring 40 businesses? And if the number is down from 40, what is that number? There's nothing that I do not understand about that. It's a very simple question.
It's not a deferral.
So what would you like to call it? How many people are we letting them wait to pay with no penalty? How many businesses?
I am not aware.
You're not aware. Okay, so with that being said,
And it's not that, and I'll just correct you, it's not that we're not asking them to pay taxes. It is a change in the way that we administer our income tax policy relative to estimated payments. It has actually helped us better manage our revenue as it comes into the city and does not expose us to the potential for a very large refund payment as we would have had to do in 2007, but we couldn't do in 2008 because we didn't have enough money in the bank to make it happen. So for you to continue to call it a deferral
what do you call
is
it?
either
Please?
posturing or a misunderstanding of what exactly is going on. I don't
What
know
is
what
the
else.
word of what you call your process, Mayor?
I would call it paying taxes with no dollars.
It's called
All businesses and all individuals pay the taxes when they are due.
Okay, so if we're not going to keep continuing the deferral word, I would like to make a recommendation for legislation to modify the income tax board ordinance so that if with the deferrals or the whatever you want to call it, I'm using the word deferral, Mayor.
Estimated tax payments?
Huh?
Estimated
Well,
tax
you
payments?
estimated tax payments and or deferrals. I would like to make a recommendation for legislation for the next council meeting that we quarterly, council and the auditor know quarterly how much is being deferred each quarter and how many businesses are being deferred. I'm not asking for businesses' names. I'm asking for those two numbers since we need a budget on a deficit of possibly 2.5 million, and you're telling me it has nothing to do with the 40 businesses that we're deferring.
Councilwoman, we do not have a tax deferral program, so to have that information would be very easy to get to you. It is zero. We do not have a tax deferral program.
Correct. We've never put one in place, and that's a separate issue.
We are
for
not in
other
the
time.
practice of deferring taxes.
So
We
that's
collect
my
taxes when they are
recommendation
due.
for legislation to be drawn up, and I would hope that I can get a council member to support me so we could have that at the next council meeting in November.
Can you summarize that again, the legislation that you're
I would
requesting?
be requesting legislation that the deferrals or / estimated payments that are being brought in 18 months later, that the number of businesses that we are deferring and the amount that we are deferring that comes in quarterly, that it be disclosed to council and the auditor's office for budgeting purposes, since we are looking at a deficit here for next year, a sizable deficit.
So, Mayor, you're saying that information does not exist?
It would be zero.
It would be zero. I don't know how else to explain this to you. It is not deferral. We are not deferring taxes. We are collecting taxes when they are due from every company and every individual in this community. And to continue to insinuate that we're not is either one, ignorance of what's actually going on, or it's politics. Or maybe it's something else. But we're not deferring taxes. I don't care what the newspaper has to say or what anyone else has to say. We are not deferring taxes.
Mr. Wolfser.
Mayor, I guess I'm kind of in the same place because about a year ago, we had there were discussions with this council on the same issue, and maybe we're arguing semantics or we're not using the right term to get the right correct information from you. But I know we've had conversations about this. It was very public conversations that there were businesses that were asked not to pay for the reason that you stated, which was we don't want to be in a position to have to pay a refund. Correct?
So
you've
there's a
asked
difference
that-
between having businesses and individuals pay taxes when they are due and making estimated payments. They're two separate things.
Okay.
We're
so,
not deferring taxes. So that's a term that someone else, not myself, nor my income tax administrator, has utilized. That's
Okay.
something that someone else has utilized.
Okay,
We are not
let's get
deferring
rid of the word
tax
defer. That's fine. Okay, so let's look at this. If we ask the question, then have we asked businesses to reduce the amount of estimated taxes that they are paying based on information that maybe they've given us because they think that we would owe them money in another year, in another period?
I don't know that we are asking businesses to reduce the amount of taxes they are paying to the city.
Are we
If
asking
we would
businesses
like-
to not pay tax? I'll keep going around this because we're someplace in there, we're missing something and we're just not able to get the right words on this side of the bench.
Perhaps I can help Mr. Wolfser. What Findlay does that is not common and not done around the state is estimated taxes due quarterly in the year following the profits that were made. Every city I've ever talked to in the entire state collects 2015's profits taxes in the form of estimated payments quarterly in 2016, and a final filing is due in October of that following year. So not April like us, but October. What Findlay does is, and what the state has said and prior audit firms, is that we have a practice of delaying those receipts up to 18 months beyond the year the profits were incurred. That's what we're doing differently.
My question is, if my corporation owes taxes, whether or not it's paid quarterly or deferred, as she says, at the end of the year, are my taxes still due and have to be paid? Yes.
Yes. Say that again? I'm not sure that answer's correct.
If I owe taxes at the end of the year, right, whether I make estimated tax payments or not, right, are they still due at the end of the year? So I'm going to pay my taxes.
in October.
Yeah,
When your taxes are due, they're due, and you pay
I'm
them.
just not going to make them quarterly. I'm going to make them.
I don't think that question is being answered clearly. The answer to your question is, normally they would be paid in October of that following year. We're deferring them up to 18 months beyond that date.
That's the way I've always done it. But if the city comes to me and says, hey, rather, my marathon, right, just use them as an example, that has a floor of tax attorneys up there trying to make sure that their tax bill is the least amount as they have to make goes to the federal, state, and local levels, right? So if we tell them they owe so much the first quarter, they pay it. We tell them they owe so much the second quarter, and they pay it. Third quarter, they pay it. The fourth quarter, they come back and say, no. When we calculated this, we've recalculated this, and at the end of the year, the amount that we paid you owe us back because we didn't owe it to begin with. And so then, this is why they did it. So I'm not saying it's marathon was the reason. So then we have to write them a huge check, right, for the amount that they overpaid in their estimate, right, and the amount of a refund. And so what the administration and the tax department said, we don't want to get caught in that burden again, because when that burden hit, we didn't have the money to pay back. And we as a city, right, if we owe somebody money, right, especially if they paid it, and we owe it back to them if they paid more taxes than what's owed to them, and we can't write the check, is that right or wrong?
There's a lot of questions there.
Point of clarification, though.
Excuse me,
The
I guess.
administration didn't come up with this policy. This was something that was in place well beyond this administration walking in the door in 2012. It was council legislation.
Yeah, and to simplify it and answer the question, I guess the best way to think of it is this way, I guess, in summarizing. And I agree, this is a deferral program. It's what it's been called, and you can hash the semantics any way you want to, but the net effect is, in 2012, we pushed tax receipts that we were going to receive in 2012 into 2013. We would have received them as estimated payments in 12. Based on how their business was doing in 12, we would have received the full final accounting of it in October of 13. That deferral has happened year after year after year. So if you ended the deferral program in this year, there are, as I understand it, deferrals still happening. In other words, we're still telling people we're delaying the receipt of those estimated payments for up to 18 months. If you ended up this year, the net effect would basically be the opposite of what happened in 12. Instead of deferring 12 into 13 and delaying that money coming in, what you would accomplish is you would bring 18's deferrals, 18's future revenue, back into 17 and potentially avoid any shortfall on revenue and give yourself a year and a half to 2 years to prepare for what might happen in the economy if it's not a blip. So there is some merit to the councilwoman's request.
I just think there's a lot of misconception out there with regard to the word deferral. No one is avoiding paying taxes. And the more accurate we can make the actual payment when it is receipted is the goal of council's ordinance.
Mr. Watson.
I defer to Mr. Webster.
Thank you for delaying that. Paul, that's correct. And that, at the end, ultimately, it's all going to wash out. However, what we've done in the process by delaying, not deferring, delaying these payments is we've taken money out of the city's coffers, let the business keep that, and anything that we could have done with that cash prior to the time that we may have or may not have had to pay that back.
I understand that. What would you do with that money when you know it's not really yours potentially? What flexibility do you really have when you know you may have to give it back? That's the point. We don't really know whether it's our money when it's estimated. And that is the history of the problem. We would have cash. The question is, what would we really do with it until we know what is actually payable?
So what we would do in that case is, if Andrew should have a good idea why he would potentially delay those payments, if we were actually getting the money, he would still have that information, correct? he would still know that he's had conversations with that business. They're saying, look, we think we're overpaying, and at some point you're going to owe us. So Andrew should come to us and say, we need to have put away X amount of dollars because we're going to have some overpayments in the beginning of next year for last year's tax receipts.
So you're going to go through all that and have Andrew make a guess about what we think we should be putting away instead of just dealing with known dollars?
Andrew's making a guess now.
No, he's not.
How can he not be making a guess if he's asking somebody to delay payment?
We have asked them to make installment payments on what their tax obligation is going to be in the current year.
I can also share statistically what we found prior to this process starting is that we were able to project receipts fairly accurately. The introduction of deferring that revenue has taken away your ability to project those receipts with a statistical model. Basically what's happening is, if the mayor's statements are accurate, and I have no reason to believe they're not, we as an office and as a city do not have a real view of what the statistical probability is of the amounts coming in for next year. The only person that has any knowledge at all is your income tax administrator and potentially your mayor. But the information hasn't been shared with my office, your income tax board, or your body. So knowing the number of deferrals and more importantly the amounts without compromising any confidential data could be vital for those calculations for next year. So thank you. I have nothing further to add.
I just don't know how statistically that could be true when the variance in what has been estimated in the past has been proven to have significant volatility.
Mr. Niemeyer.
But is it right to give some businesses that choice and the other people do not get that choice?
I look at it this way. What's the most prudent way to run your operation?
You don't spend the money till you have it.
That's correct. When it's not really ours until we know it's ours, why spend it? And that is the pickle that we have put ourselves in the past, and I think it's one of the reasons why the ordinance exists.
Mr. Watson.
Going back to Councilwoman Frisch's original question about asking for legislation, I second that request in terms of going back to what the auditor said, knowing the number of businesses and the dollar amounts, just as in the interest of transparency.
I don't know that legally you can ask for whatever the information is that you just asked for, which is the number of businesses and the dollar amounts. I don't know that you can do that. In fact, I think we just went round and round with the Attorney General on that specific issue.
Mr. Wilson.
It was, when we've had this discussion before, Mayor, it was always the names of the businesses we were not able to know, which I can understand that makes sense. I'm not sure why the dollar amount and the number of businesses would be something that would be confidential.
I can tell you that total information is shared regularly in different cities around the state.
Final word, Ms. Fritchie.
So to be clear, my request again is I'm not asking to change what we currently have in place that gives Andrew the power to defer based off of his delay. I am asking that what we are continuing to do, the process that we are continuing to do, that we are delaying businesses with no penalty and no interest for a select group, that we at least know what that delayed amount is on a quarterly basis and how many businesses that deferral amount makes up. So I'm not asking at this time to try to set criteria, even though I feel that that is also an important piece to this. But at this point, based off of the information that you provided today about deficit, when you talk to your department heads, I want to have as many numbers accessible for us for planning for budgeting, and I don't feel that it is hurting anybody to do so, and that is why I made the request, but it is not to set up criteria at this time, although I think that's important.
Any other old business?